Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to an individual. His name is Roger. One of my listeners passed on a post that he had put on Reddit. It is extremely interesting. And I said, I got to talk to this guy. He's up there not too far away. He's up there in Boone, Iowa, and I've gotten already a few reports about Bigfoot activity up there in Boone. I'm curious to hear what Roger is going to share with us, what's going on up there. And this one as well, it's going to be one where Roger is a little bit more comfortable if I have any questions to just jump in, and it might be a little bit of a back and forth. So just to know, that's what we're getting into today. But Roger, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man. Right up there in Boone. It's a beautiful area. But is there anything else that the listeners would need to know about you before we get started, Roger?
No, not necessarily. It'll all be covered in the story.
Absolutely. How about this? Feel free to take us back as far back as we need to go to where this weirdness first started happening to you up there in Boone, Iowa.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. I guess there was a few instances, I guess you could say it started because I grew up very skeptical of anything that wasn't explainable immediately, I guess you could say. So when I was pretty young, I had some strange encounters happen around Boone as well, but I didn't start piecing it all together until I guess I got older. So I guess the first real instance that I wrote down and shared with people was on the local Facebook page for Boone. And I explained how the night before I went on a walk with my dogs and my wife. We left around probably 10 p.m. and we always walked towards McCo's Park, and we'd go back into the old part of McCo's that isn't as accessible. I guess you could say it's the old part of the Frisbee golf course. It's not in use for Frisbee golf anymore. It's gated off, but there's still some walking trails back there. And I would walk my dogs around that area almost every night. And this first night, I was walking. I guess I should say I have a big German Shepherd. He's about 110 pounds. His name is Finn. And then I have a small terrier mix. His name is Booger. He's probably about 20 pounds. So we would be walking through town towards the park. And I remember the first thing that happened was me, my wife, and my dogs saw like a big group of deer run away from the area of the park back into town, which is strange. They don't usually run towards neighborhoods, and there's probably a good 10, 15 deer. It was a very large group. And not many deer in one big group in the middle of town before. That was strange. Usually just one or two if there's any. And then I guess immediately after that, we heard what sounded like, I guess when I first heard it, it sounded like maybe some guys that were drunk making weird noises. It sounded like coyotes howling, but if like a drunk guy was doing it, I guess you could say. So I honestly thought it was pretty funny at first. And we didn't think anything of it. We kept walking towards the park, and then there's a little dip in the ground that's not street level. I guess it goes down into a big ditch. And I saw like eyes, I guess, reflecting back from the street light that was right above head. And my German Shepherd started growling at it. He's not aggressive at all. I was a dog trainer for 2 years, and I still haven't really seen him act like that aside from a few times. And it was accompanied by a kind of like a hiss, but it sounded really deep. Like it's hard to explain. I've never heard an animal make a noise like that. And he got freaked out, went back home, and I wrote about it and posted it the next day on Facebook and asked people around town if they had any experiences. And then after that, I got a job working on the railroad. And right when I started there, people ended up finding out I was the one that wrote that post on Facebook. And I guess it was talk of the town the week I got hired. So everyone was like, that was you? That's crazy. That same week, we were over underneath Pilch's Bridge, and we heard something that sounded just like that, and it really freaked us out. I think I had 2 or 3 different people that work there independently tell me that around that same time that I had that weird stuff happen, they had something weird happen to them as well.
What year was this approximately?
2023. I guess you could say that was the catalyst that made me more aware of these things. And I guess I developed a fascination with that park around that time, so I'd go there quite a bit. Even though I kept having weird things happen every once in a while, I don't know. It didn't freak me out enough to keep me away. I was more fascinated and intrigued by what I was experiencing, I suppose. But I guess a couple months in, I didn't have any big encounters happen except for maybe hearing some weird noises on the track at night. And that's pretty common for, I'd say, anywhere your brain can freak you out and make you hear stuff or give you the scariest thought, even though it could be something that's explained. So I didn't really think of anything, and I ended up not being able to sleep well at night. I was having like insomnia or whatever, and I would take my dog for car rides through that park at like really weird hours, like 2, 3 in the morning, just because I just really couldn't sleep, and I didn't want to just sit there and lay in bed with my eyes open. A couple weeks doing that, nothing really weird happened. And then there was one night in particular that I was riding through McCoast Park, and I guess there's a couple of gravel drives that are the shape of a U. It goes real far back and back up again. There's a big grassy area in the middle, and there's a couple sections of those, probably 5 or 6. And the very last section, people probably know it. It's got a chainsaw carved heart by it. My dog started going ballistic basically, and he doesn't ever do. He was like trying to throw himself out of the car. I had to roll the windows up, and I look in front of me again, and I saw what I can only describe as like a pale-looking humanoid crawling on all fours, but very fast. And my dog was trying to jump out of the car and chase it, and he doesn't do that with deer or dogs or cats or anything, really. He never really acts like that. I don't think I've seen him that aggressive since then, actually. So that really freaked me out. I'm not going to lie. I had to just stop there in the middle of the road and kind of process what I saw. And around this time is when I really started journaling things that were happening to me, because that was probably the first time in my life that I couldn't try to rationalize it, because I visually saw something with my eyes. And my dog, I guess, affirmed that it was true to me. A couple weeks after that, I made a large post on Reddit that got quite a bit of attention, and I just explained my backstory a little bit. And it was interesting because after I had that encounter in McCo's, I started having encounters at my job, and coworkers were also sharing stories that they had. For example, there was a time that one of my coworkers was stationed at the High Bridge, and they had seen flashes of pale movement in the brush across from where they were stationed at. And some of them would say they heard voices or what sounded like human voices, but they couldn't understand the words they were saying. They could just tell it was like human vocalizations, I suppose.
The things that were being seen like by High Bridge, was that also in 2023 as well?
Yeah, most of this early part of the story would be last year.
Gotcha.
And then I had some encounters this year that I'll end up getting to. It's just probably the biggest thing that happened to me early on was seeing that thing out of my car. It really did freak me out quite a bit. I don't know. I just decided to start journaling it online, started talking to other people. Then that's why I posted it in that crawler group, because I hadn't known what a crawler was. Or it's just, there was one night in particular, a little bit after this, that I was walking my German Shepherd to that park. So around this time, I quit taking my little one in that direction. I'd walk in separate. My wife ended up getting no one walks with me anymore. And I was walking my dog, and then we saw these deer about halfway to the park, and they weren't acting normal. I got a big dog. He's interested in them, and they're just staring at me. And then they start slowly walking away, but every couple steps they like stop and look back at me again. And I thought it was interesting. I've never seen them behave. I mean, I was getting pretty close. I was probably within 15 yards, and they were just walking towards the park in the direction I was already heading. So it was like I was following them, and like they were trying to show me something. And as I kept getting closer to the park, more deer had joined the group, and I feel like I was getting washed all the time. And so everywhere I'd turn, I'd shine my flashlight, and I'd see eyes of deer looking at me. But it was funny because I felt that feeling like maybe 10 times. And every time I was telling myself, maybe I'm just making it up in my head since it happened 9 times already. But then I look up right where I have the feeling, and there are eyes looking at me. And we get to the entrance of the park, and the big group of deer, all of them split off and go to the left side, which is where the neighborhood is. And then my dog lunged at something and I tripped and I look up again. And opposite of where all these deer are was a lone deer in the same spot that I had that first thing I saw with my wife and dogs, like in the exact same area. And it was just staring at me. And I just got a weird vibe from it. It looked off to me. Sometimes you just have a primal reaction and listen to your gut, I suppose. It just, even if you don't have an explanation for why it's so freaky feeling. But I remember it looking at me and I felt weird because that deer wasn't with the big group that was walking. I saw them all, none of them went down into the ditch. They didn't even touch the grass. They were in the middle of the road and then they ran over to the left of the neighborhood. So this was seemingly what it looked like they were dragging me to go see. And then I look away for a second to go look across the street at the other deer, and I look back and this deer is probably 20 feet closer to me than he was. And I had this on camera because around this time I was having so many weird encounters that I started recording some of my walks, and that's also why I had that flashlight with me. And I ended up just walking backwards until I couldn't see his eyes anymore. It was freaking me out that he just kept staring at me. And then I go home and I swap out my dogs and I start walking my little one downtown, which is the opposite direction. And I got over by the end of the walk because I hadn't had anything else happen. I was on the phone with my wife and I go into the alleyway of our house, and at the end of the alleyway, I see two different pale humanoid looking things I said walking like apes. It was interesting. And they weren't moving fast. It was like a very casual pace. And they were looking at me. And I was on the phone with my wife and I had stopped talking and she asked me what was wrong. And I wasn't going to say anything until they were gone. So I just stood there for probably a good 15 seconds after they left because it was freaky, and I ended up just running inside. And then I guess that was near the end of the year.
Did you say they were walking like apes?
Yeah, this time in specific, it wasn't like the one I saw in McCo's when I was in my car. That one was like almost like a spider, like really low to the ground and really quick. But this particular instance, they were walking like apes, yeah. And what I remember is they looked different than the one I had seen previously. These were muscular. They weren't built like apes, but they were stronger than what you'd think of when you hear a crawler. I think the image in people's heads is lanky and skinny, which is what I saw the first time. But the second time, these had quite a bit of muscle on them.
Now, when you say they walked like apes, let's say if I've never seen an ape walk before, can you describe what that means?
Kind of walking with a hunchback with their knuckles touching the ground.
Oh, wow.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and overly muscular too, you said?
Yeah, not as big as like an ape itself, but like a big, almost a bodybuilder, some dude, like Arnold. I don't know, like a strong man.
No hair at all?
No hair. It was pale as well.
Did you see, was there a shape to the head at all?
I guess like a large human face, I'd say.
Okay.
Or humanoid-esque. I was pretty far away. I was standing on the end of an alley, so it was however long a block is.
And this is also in 2023?
Yep, this was right at the end of the year in winter.
Did you smell anything during that time?
Not on that particular instance, but this year and last year, both at my job, going along the tracks at night, I smelled the smell of sulfur a lot, either immediately before or after some weird stuff happened, and usually just really foul smelling stuff that was always nasty, like sulfur, rotting flesh, different times, different occasions. After this, I started really digging into it online and whatnot, and I got into looking into Boone's history, and so there's, I guess, a lot of what you could call haunted locations. Some of them are, I know there's been paranormal investigations at quite a few of them, and a lot of research teams have said the Historical Society building is the building with the most activity they've ever seen. And I didn't necessarily go visit most of these places, but if they were out and about, I'd go visit them. And around this time, I was moving to the outskirts of Boone, between Boone and Fraser, into a camper temporarily. And funnily enough, it's really close to the latter half of the track that my job runs on. So it explores, it's a like a tour through rural Boone County that you can't really get to unless you kayak down the river or I guess hike through the woods. And it's right in the river valley. It's very pretty, but it goes north towards Fraser and then back down again back to Boone. And I live parallel with Fraser, but not in Fraser. So just if you went just north of the track. So there's a specific part of the track that everyone always got bad vibes from called Oak Park. Really freak people out. Even me, I had weird feelings there. I feel like it was always darker and colder there, no matter what time of day it was, even if it was noon or midnight. Always it always looked darker in there, like light didn't cast as far. It just felt strange. But if you follow that forest up, you get to a field, and I live right in the middle of that field in that forest now. And my experiences this year, I didn't see anything with my eyes like I did last year, but I think they were screwing with me more, especially after I moved into the camper, because very quickly I started having, basically at one night we woke up because something slammed into either the roof or side of my camper really hard. Like it's like a grown man sprinted at it and leapt into the side of my camper. It rocked the whole thing and my dog started going crazy. And then I was hearing tapping on my windows for a bit. All of us were, my wife and my dogs. And I went out and got a trail cam. I don't have a lot of money, by the way. I guess that's relevant for why not a lot of this has better recorded evidence, because I was using an iPhone 6 at the time, and the trail cam being $40 was already pretty pricey. And I woke up one day and it was broken. It's still sitting out where it was, hanging upside down, busted. I don't really know what happened to it, but it has an SD card tray that clips shut, and the clip is completely broken off, and the SD card's jammed in there so hard that I can't get it out unless I pried it out, and there's a big crack down the middle of it. And I just haven't gotten another one yet. And I remember one night in particular, my wife was home with our dogs, and I was at work, and it was pretty dark out, and it was raining off and on. And we got down to the end of our track, and we are getting the customers back on to come back again. And my radio started going crazy in a way that I had never heard it go off before. It was, even if I'm not supposed to turn my radio off, so I left it on, but even if I made sure all the settings were right, and it was just like the speaker was getting triggered, but it was different than the sound it makes when you press the button to speak into it. It was receiving something is what it seemed like. And it started off pretty slow, just every couple seconds, but the closer we got to Oak Park, it started increasing in frequency. It was buzzing more and more until we got to Oak Park, and it was basically just pure white static noise. And everyone I was with was freaked out at this point. I had told a lot of my coworkers my stories, and we kept going, and we got to High Bridge, and at that point we were far enough away from Oak Park that the radio had actually gone back to normal after decreasing in frequency as often as it was buzzing. And as soon as I got to the High Bridge, my wife texts me, who is parallel with Oak Park, just a little up from there, and she says that she had to come back inside real fast and lock the doors, and she's scared because she took my small dog out. She took my big dog outside first, and then my small dog was inside whining at the window because he was jealous that his brother got to go outside. So then she let my small dog out, and then something in the cornfield started making the exact same whimpering noise that my dog was making, and my dog put his tail between his legs and ran inside. And that was immediately after I had that stuff happen to me in a very, not even that far away from where my camper was at. And there's been a few instances of, I've had my big dog outside. There's I guess right across from my camper, there's an old mobile home that's, it's completely abandoned. There's like holes in the ceiling. It's very old. There's no front door. But I had my big dog outside, and something was whistling for him inside of that building. That actually prompted me to go and get a weapon and go check the place to make sure nobody was in it. And I didn't see anything, but that didn't necessarily make me feel any better. There's just some nights in particular where I just get really afraid to go outside, and it's completely random times. Sometimes I can go weeks without feeling it. And then every once in a while, I just feel like I really shouldn't be out there. It really freaks me out. But a lot of my encounters this year have just been tapping on my windows, slamming on my walls, whistling for my dogs. I've had one instance of it mocking my voice, and then my dog's whimpering. And that's the point where I'm at now. I'm still every once in a while having these weird encounters, and they come and go. Sometimes they go a long time, but it always makes me nervous if it's been a while since I've had anything weird happen, because I'm worried it's going to come back even stronger.
Oh, I absolutely get it. What's the last thing that you experienced?
The most recent big thing was, I don't even, the thing about these stories is I don't even know if it's all the same entity, if it's completely different things, if it's, yeah, or I don't know if it's all crawlers or if there's other things going on. At this point, I'm leaning towards other things as well, because this most recent thing that happened to me was probably not a crawler. I'll just say that. I had gotten in my car to go home from work, and I put my AirPods in to call my wife to let me know I was going home. And I'd already started driving at the point that I had pulled my AirPods out. And so I'm still driving when I go to put them away, and then I can't find my case anywhere. And I don't even understand how that's possible, because I got them out in my car, but I was really tired and went home and didn't really care about it, took a nap. And then a couple hours later, I woke up and we were going to go to the grocery store to get some food. And before we left, we decided to go look for my AirPods real quick because they can't be too far. So we start going through my whole car and can't find it. Then we go through my pants, my coat, my shirt. We can't find it anywhere. And so we step off to the side away from my car, and we're thinking out loud about where it could be. And I kid you not, my AirPod case fell from the sky and hit my wife in the shoulder so hard it left a bruise and then landed right in front of my feet. And I have no idea how that's possible. That was just like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
That is not good. Were there any trees above where you guys were, or was it an open area?
No, it's basically right in the middle of a cornfield.
Oh, boy.
I guess about near where I live, this happened the other day. It wasn't necessarily an encounter I had, but just, I guess, wisdom that I learned. I was helping a friend paint an office space, and they had somebody else there who I was like casually acquainted with. I had worked with him before, and he's probably in his 50s, and he's been around Boone and Fraser his whole life. And we ended up just lightly chatting about scary things that have happened to us around here, because a lot of people have haunted house stories. And this guy who I know just started talking like, yeah, Boone's got a weird history. And he was like, I'm trying to find a way to word this that doesn't give out right where I live. He had mentioned a really dark, bad, evil place that really has some creepy history that freaks him out real bad. And he said, yeah, it's on the way to Y Camp. And I'm like, that's right where I live. And he didn't know that. He had no idea I lived there. And I didn't. So he just mentioned that, like, right across from where I live is this place that he said it used to be a camp, and there were children that were murdered there, like a lot of them.
Oof. No,
and
this is bad.
Yeah, I mean, I can literally see. I can't see it right now because it's dark out. But if it was light out, I'd be able to see it from my window that I'm looking through right now. It's like across the street from me.
I'm not sure how to deal with this one. Yeah, this is really bad. And okay, so I mean that's got to be in newspapers if I look it up. Just that history. How far back did that happen? Do you know those murders?
See, I'm not sure, and okay. I've been doing a lot of digging into Boone's history myself, just because this is something I like doing, and there is a lot of weird history out here, but I'm not gonna lie, a lot of it's also not published or talked about. I don't know why. It's just a big, large portion of it just isn't.
No, I get it.
At least unless you went literally to the Historical Society building and started looking at really old publications, which is what I've been having to do recently to get a lot of answers, because a lot of it's just not publicly available, at least easily.
What have you been finding in these old publications in the historical area?
The Historical Society building itself is an old Masonic temple. And I think when it was being used as a Masonic temple, it was the oldest one in the United States that was still serving. And that's the building I had mentioned that has a big history of being extremely haunted. There's a lot of weird stuff in there too. My family used to rent out the basement for gatherings, I guess. And there was a couple times that they would lock the stairwell, but they wouldn't lock up the elevators. So I had to go up there by myself as like an 11-year-old in the dark. And I just start walking around these. And I never got very far because it always freaked me out, but there's a trap door on the top floor that leads down to the basement. And I don't know, you can see that online. That's talked about. Nobody knows why it's there, at least not that I was able to talk to. And another thing I learned is just recently there's a bunch of tunnels under Boone. A lot of these old buildings down on the main street used to have access to a tunnel system. I don't think it's officially stated what it's for, but I guess the most popular idea is during the Prohibition, there were underground speakeasies and transport tunnels for alcohol. And that's why a lot of these old bars used to have access to these systems, but they've been long covered up and whatnot since then. And then the whole river valley itself in this part of Iowa was all built on native burial grounds as well. And then a little bit north of where I live, there was something called the Boone County Poor Farm. It was an insanity like institution. I don't think it held as many people as a super large one would, but from what I understand, like they keep people that basically like women that had postpartum depression up to people that needed live-in care, a very wide range of people that were staying at these places. But I remember reading somewhere, and I'm not sure if this is 100% true, at least this specific part, but I remember hearing somewhere that they chained them to the ceilings at night, not suspended in the air or anything, but just so they couldn't freely move too much and hurt each other or themselves. And there was one night that the whole place caught on fire and they all burned alive inside. And then that's like a mile and a half north of where I live. There's like a memorial park there now, but it's owned by a farmer, and he's excavated where the gravestones used to be and pushed them all into a ditch, and you can still see the old broken stone memorials of them in the ditch. And I think there's only one that's left intact, and it's what that park is named after.
Yeah, I'm definitely not claiming any energy that is from this conversation at all. You've got a lot going on, man. This is
no,
really
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Stuff.
It's a lot. Yeah, I know. Actually, there's one more thing I wanted to add that I forgot about. We had started looking into some of this stuff, and I ended up making some friends with a couple people that were more in tune with this kind of thing. Two of them are Native American that are pretty heavy into their culture, and they've given me some things for spiritual protection and whatnot. And so I started looking more into that, and I ended up getting an analog spirit box. And my wife was more interested in that than I was, but when we first got it, there's another property on this road that freaks me out. I don't think it's the same property as this camp. It's very close by this camp I mentioned, but it's right before the dip down to White Camp. There's this old property that just has two old wooden buildings on it, like a shack and like maybe a small cabin that's completely falling apart. There's 3 trees there. I don't know what it is about that place, but it freaks me out like really bad. I do not like that place, but we went there this night with the spirit box and stayed in my car, but pulled into the old grass drive, and we used it, and we started talking to some. At this point, I grew up super skeptical. I didn't even know if this was going to work because I used to not believe in any of this stuff when I was growing up. So I was expecting it not to work as clear as it did, but my wife started talking into it, and basically was like, "What's your name?" And it says Tom. And she starts talking to Tom, and she asked, "Is anybody else there?" And then I heard screaming, and then I heard another voice. I think it said no or something like that. And then it said, "Go away." And then my wife goes, "Who are you?" And it says devil. So we left. And I haven't used it since then. I haven't used the spirit box since then.
Yeah, that stuff isn't my cup of tea. So I will talk for a little bit about what my viewpoint of this is. You have so much going on, and
right,
half of the stuff that you're talking about just screams Bigfoot activity to me. And I'll talk you through it. So things like your trailer getting hit, total Bigfoot stuff. Your the dog mimic noise and your voice being mimicked, tapping on the windows. This is all stuff I hear all the time in my interviews I do on my podcast from witnesses that are in areas with heavy Bigfoot activity. The other crazy thing is that, Boone, I've had multiple people over the years reach out to me saying, "Hey, we've had visuals of Bigfoot in this area. I'm not a crawler guy, so I don't get those." Also, Fraser does have a history of Bigfoot sightings. And in fact, there's a really interesting report you can read on the BFRO where it talks about how there's heavy Bigfoot activity in a area east of Fraser in a campsites along the river.
That's right where I live, east of Fraser. Literally right where I live.
Contains a public access boat launch, things like that. I'm thinking, this has got to be the same area. I would recommend if you go to bfro.net and it's under Boone County in Iowa, it's from 2013. And there's a lot of information in there. You probably want to read the whole thing. That's happened over the years. There's actually a investigator named, you might be able to track down, that says that he makes that area his main research area in the report.
Really?
Which is pretty interesting. So there's all that going on, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got all these crawler, but the interesting thing is you've got I think what you would say the classic crawler sighting, or the classic version of the crawler, which most people think of. But then you have these kind of, I've never really heard of a big muscular, like ape type moving one.
Me either. I've never heard of that before I saw it.
Exactly. Now, there's something else I want to ask you, and I'm reluctant to because I love this area so much, but I'm gonna, have you heard anything weird down in Ledges State Park, which is just south of Boone?
Yeah, I have.
Ah, dang it.
I actually have. This is a big part of my story that I somehow forgot to mention, actually.
Okay.
Between all these sightings at McCoe's, and I guess the reason I forgot to mention this is because in my head, I purposefully went over here this day to avoid having a situation like I was having at McCoe's. Right. I'm big into camera gear, so if I don't have a lot of money no more, and at the time I was thinking about trying to record some night vision stuff, and I had gotten an old Sony camera from like 2002, and basically if you put a magnet on it, it can force open this hot plate and make it sensitive to IR light. Therefore, if I used an IR torch, I could basically have night vision. So I had bought this IR torch, and I told my wife that I wanted to go to Ledges at night to try it out, but I didn't want to be there super late. So we were going to get right before the sunset, and we parked at Floodpool and walked up the main drive really far, almost to the beginning of the hill that goes back up again. We were hanging out by that old stone bridge, and I just had something intuitively be like, hey, it's getting dark. Maybe you should start heading back just in case you want to get close to your car so you're not so far away if something creepy happens. But we were going to take our time, so we decided to start walking back. But I was playing around with this camera, and we were having a good time. So it took a really long time to get back to even like the last water crossing. And this is the very last water crossing before you get to that bridge that leads back to Floodpool. So we're not very far from the car at this point. And yeah, my wife were actually joking about, oh, I don't know why we were so scared, because this isn't scary at all. We haven't had anything happen. And then we hear the voice of what I can only say was the voice of a little boy say, help, I want my daddy, 3 times. But it was like every other word was enunciated different. The cadence was different, and like the pitch was different. It was like, and it was the same exact thing 3 times. It was like whatever was trying to do this was trying very hard to convince us it was a little boy, and it wasn't. It was also really loud and sounded like it came from almost every direction at once. It was, and then all of the deer that were hiding in the brush ran out of the brush into the road towards us, not like at us, but like in our direction, away from whatever this was. And then we heard something barreling through the brush, like it sounded big and heavy, and it was sprinting at us. So we got so freaked out, we ran back to the car and drove home.
Oh my goodness. There's Bigfoot in Ledges, dude. Holy mackerel.
I wouldn't be surprised. I've heard other people tell me stories. There's a legend of Ledges called the Climber, which like my crawler sighting, but instead of having something crawling, it's something climbing on the rock walls.
Oh, really?
That a lot of people have. Yeah, I've been seeing some of that recently. Not me, like I've read other people's stories recently about that, in Ledges specifically.
Is it like, so they see something that looks like the normal crawler, but it's crawling?
I think they're far away.
Okay.
I think, I don't know if it necessarily has pale skin or anything, but it's a humanoid that climbs on the walls, which reminded me of my crawler sighting.
Man, I did not want to know all this crawler stuff is so close to my general area. Not to say I'm like right there, but I'm a lot closer than I ever wanted to be to any of this stuff.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm central Iowa, but south. So have other people in the town have sighting of the same type of creatures that you saw in McCoe's?
This person was saying about 20 years ago, my husband and I were walking our dog, and we came to the corner that curves to the west on the north side of the cemetery. Our dog stopped dead in his tracks and refused to budge another step. My husband had a hard time controlling him as he wanted to bolt. There was no one around, and there was no animals around. We could not explain why he was doing that. Our dog struggled and got loose. We ran after him, and he went straight home. She mentioned that because that was pretty close to the park that I had seen something. It's like right next to it.
Yeah.
And this person said, I feel like some of this joke, it's written not as a joke, but it's written with some humor. So I'm not sure how much of this is true or not. It might all be true. This guy might just be a funny guy. But he goes, I feel like now that the lid is off of weird activity here in Boone, I can finally tell my story. I've hid this for so long because I didn't think anyone would believe me. In 1993, I was hammered and trying to find my way home. At the time, I lived in Cedar Falls, and the chances of me getting home okay were slim. I was on Kate Shelley around 1246. I accidentally walked off the road into someone's backyard, but I knew I had messed up when I stepped in dog poop. I got out of there fast. Into McCoe's Park I went, and I wandered for a while and finally ended up at the tennis court. This is when I first heard it. I cannot duplicate the beast cry in the typewritten word, but it was chilling. And then he writes what it would have sounded like. I'm not going to make that noise. But it's similar to what I heard. What I told you was like sounded like the drunk guys screaming. It's actually written exactly what I heard when I heard, not the actual drunk guys, the one I told you I thought it was the drunk guys. This is exactly what it sounded like, he goes. I had the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I ran as fast and as far as I could. If that beast would have cornered me, I wouldn't be here to type all this crap tonight. And then my uncle swears he saw something similar to the crawler in the 1970s. Hold on. This is around Don Williams. They said that they saw what looked like a cross between a hyena and something else and very big. I thought they were pulling my chain, but...
Oh, man. Dang it, dude. Really? Are you kidding me? We got stinking hyena dog man up there, too?
I guess. This is... Okay.
So ticked.
About 2 years ago, I was sleeping with my windows open, and I was awakened by the sound of dogs or something off in the distance chasing something. Sounded like it was headed right across my farm, and then boom, something big hit the side of my house really hard. Right below my open window, something was breathing/panting extremely loud. I sat halfway up, but was frozen. It was really weird. I couldn't move mostly because I was scared to death. I sat there looking at the window for a good 5 minutes, just hoping it would go away. My big dog was standing on the foot of my bed, low guttural growling, but not barking, which is unusual for her. And there was just a couple of people. Another thing I'd like to say is through me posting a lot of these stories and mentioning that I work on the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad, which I don't work for them, but I work on that rail line. I didn't say that in every single one of the posts I made, and some of them got a lot of attention that didn't mention the specific railway I worked on or the town I lived in. And on at least 3 different occasions, I've had random people be like, oh, you're from Central Iowa. There's one place that I'll never go to again in Central Iowa. Have you ever heard of the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad? That rail line freaked me out so bad that I'm never going back there again. I've had 3 different people tell me that without knowing that's where I lived or where I worked.
Why did it freak them out, did they say?
I don't necessarily know if they said or not. They might have just said it does have a pretty creepy vibe. If you go at night specifically, it's just the whole area used to be developed quite a bit. But it's right next to the river, and it's not in the valley, so there's no like pocket of air protecting it from tornadoes. And a lot of the old buildings and whatnot that were there got flooded away or blown down by tornadoes. And so it's just there's a lot of, I wouldn't say old building structures, but just like random large pieces of debris that kind of make it a creepy environment, especially since it doesn't really look like the rest of Iowa. It's on that river valley, but at night. I don't know. I know that there's stories about even myself and some of my coworkers heard screaming on top of the high bridge. We were on the high bridge. We were just sitting there and we heard it up the creek as well. And it was like really dark out. And the reason I would have thought it was a mountain lion initially, but it was a man screaming. And it was not by the river, which I would have chalked it to like some dudes on a boat. It was the other direction up creek. And I actually live up creek. The Bass Point Creek actually cuts almost right to the middle of my campground. And if you follow that creek down, the closest thing to civilization is the old Bass Point Creek Cemetery, which is still almost 4 miles away from the bridge. And he didn't have a light on if there was a person down there or anything. So I just don't know why someone would be down there without a light at 10:30 p.m. in October, just shouting. That was very recently. That was in early October this year. I think people just have a lot of experiences like that on that track.
So this new knowledge for me, which I know a lot of people that have gone that railroad, and they're like, "Oh, it's a beautiful," and it is beautiful, guys. But
It
I
is
guess
beautiful. It is.
people should check it out. You should go, but be
Oh, for
aware,
sure. Yeah.
it's probably creepy as all get out. And I've always been like, "Oh man, we should totally go." Now, I'll probably still go, but I'll be aware. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking of this.
Right.
There's another attraction that happens on the Boone Scenic Railroad where you can be on this car type thing and you're pedaling with, it's like a pedal car.
Yep. That's who I work for.
Ah, okay. So that to me sounds like, now again, I'm saying you should probably check it out, and economy is great, but that sounds like the most horrifying thing you could ever do in an area where it is creepy as all get out, right?
And it's a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie, it's the best job I've ever had. It's a ton of fun. A lot of people, if they, I've had so many people tell me when I've been working at night, they're like, "Do you guys do a Halloween tour? Because this is already really scary. This is terrifying just being out here." And I think next year they're planning on doing a themed Halloween tour for the first time. But it's just like, even if it's in the middle of July, people will just be like, it's super creepy. But nobody says that to go during the daytime. It's only at nighttime. There were a few days, I'm not going to lie, where we were short-staffed and I would come back alone on those bikes by myself in the very back of the fleet. So I'd have to send off all the customers by myself. And then I have to tear everything down, standing next to the river with no cell reception in the middle of the woods before I can leave. And then I'd leave and I'd be behind everybody in the woods at night by myself.
Dude.
And sometimes I got pretty scared. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm scared just hearing about it. I mean, that's absolutely horrifying. What's the fastest one of those cars can go if someone's pedaling? It can't be that fast.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Actually,
Okay,
but,
all right.
They go fast. They're motor assisted, so you go faster than like a normal pedal would be.
Got it. Okay.
You go faster than the train that goes through that same area.
Wow.
But the train doesn't go that fast. That's why. Okay. The train goes like 10 miles an hour. We go anywhere between 13 and 20 miles an hour. It depends on the type of, I don't know. It just depends on a couple things. The wind, if it's in favor, the battery percentage is anywhere between that range, I'd say. Usually probably 15 miles an hour right in the middle of that range.
Man, this episode is just going to open up a whole Pandora's box of stuff that I don't want to get involved with, but it's, I feel that half of your story is related to Bigfoot though. I honestly feel that it is. But on the other side, I think you have some crawler stuff, and now it sounds like the hyena type dogman, which I know there's been a sighting at least over in eastern Iowa a year or so ago in an area. And I think I heard there was a dogman sighting up in northwest Iowa. Can't remember the year. But now to know Boone has multiple things going on kind of makes me want to check it out again in a different light. But
yeah. Along with this Bigfoot stuff, when I posted it in a crawler subreddit, but me and my wife, and I think it was just us two, I don't think we brought any dogs this time. We were walking there pretty late in the day. It was like, I don't know, it wasn't like 11 p.m. or anything, but I guess we got there probably around 8 or 9, and it got dark as we were there, but we had lights and stuff, and we were just, I don't know how we went there. I'm not gonna lie, I can't remember. There was a reason why we went though, but there's a part of this, not like, I think the whole place used to be a road, but a long time ago. So there's this waterway that's behind the water treatment plant, and there's concrete structures, but it looked like it collapsed, like a bridge, I guess, not like a big bridge, but like a crossing. But they have it ledges, but it looks like it's collapsed.
Okay. And
the road's all gone. It's all grass. So I'm trying to explain this. You walk down the grassy path and you only see the concrete at these water crossings, but they have collapsed. And so you have to hop over rocks to get across it anyway. Needless to say, your shoes are going to get wet unless you find a way to hop across. And I don't like having wet shoes. So we were walking through there and nothing weird really happened. And we started feeling strange. So we started heading back. And I get to this water crossing that I had just crossed maybe 25 minutes ago. And there are footsteps coming out of the creek, which is not where I came from. I came from the road. So it converged through the creek up to the grassy area and then continued on. And these were big footsteps. And you can see, I have a picture of it. I wear a size 13 men's, and this footprint, the one that's in the grass right immediately following exiting the creek and the wet footsteps on the concrete. It's this is bigger than my foot by a good probably 3, 4, 5 inches, but it looks like claws. It's got long fingers and claws that pushed into the mud as well. So I guess imagine a human foot, but with really sharp talons on the ends instead of toenails. But it's like the size of a 16 men's shoe. And there's multiple footsteps coming out of the water, and they weren't there 25 minutes ago when we were there. And you can literally see them exit the water. It was freaky. And that meant that since it was still wet, it had just happened. So we decided to leave.
What in the world is going on? This is nuts. I don't know if you've ever studied the craziness that happens up and down the Des Moines River.
There's a lot of crazy stuff.
You can follow Bigfoot sightings really all the way from Fraser all the way down to the Missouri border. It's a really interesting.
Really?
Yes, it is nuts, dude. That's a whole different. I've never broken it down on this podcast because I'm still trying to put it all together. But there are history of sightings from actually north. You can go all the way to. You can follow it north too.
The whole river valley has a really weird history as well. I've been looking into that some more. It was all culturally significant and religiously important to the indigenous peoples that were here. But I don't know if you know about John Milton Lott. Do you know who that is?
I do not know.
So he was the first, one of the first. He was the first white man death in the state of Iowa, but he was a very early surveyor, basically, or at least. I think him and his dad had the same name. There's a lake named after him around here, but long story short, and I'm going to probably miss some important details or whatever, but he was upset with the native tribes because they had something to do with the death in his family. And then I think they took his wife or something. And as time went on, he just couldn't, it was eating him up alive. And I'm pretty sure infiltrated the Native American tribe, pretending to basically be one of them, and then got the chief alone, and then the chief was never seen again. And you can look up the story. There's a lot of books on it. It's the Spirit Lake Massacre, I think, is a popular story about, or retelling of that story. But he's buried around here, kind of south of Fraser along the river by Logansport. And I randomly found his grave one day just driving around because I'd like to do photography of places around here in the river valley. I have a lot of history, and I just randomly found it one day. But then researching the history of the area, I found out about this story of lost gold. Basically, these horse thieves stored a bunch of gold around the Des Moines River, but they said it's where the Boone Forks area meets the Des Moines River, which is not where. They also said it's right next to Milton Lott's monument, but Milton Lott's monument is like way south of there. So this is right out of Boone County, north around the river, or whatever the county north of us is called. It's by the Boone Forks area, basically, is what it describes in the story from a long time ago about where this gold was buried. And Lott's family is buried up there. There's a cemetery called Beggar Cemetery that's notorious for being haunted. It was literally built on native burial grounds. I'm pretty sure they just moved all the bodies that were there and put these people there. But Milton Lott's family is there, just not Milton Lott himself. But the story of the gold says it's next to his, like, Milton Lott's grave, but his grave is down south of the river. But there's just like a lot of weird stories like that along the Des Moines River. And this covers from Boone up to Fraser, and just about this lost gold story. And there's a lot of weird stories that happen along the river of lost gold, or people that hid stuff out of fear of it being taken, basically. And I found a lot of artifacts myself in the river. I like to magnet fish, and me and my wife like to look for artifacts in the rocky areas around the river, and I found some old arrowheads and stuff. There's a lot of history here.
There sure is. There's some intense history and then current day, it sounds. But Roger, I just want to say thank you for coming on. I had no idea what we were getting into. I knew a little bit, but I now know, and now everyone knows, the craziness that is in Boone, Iowa. I feel like there's going to be more coming out of this. Sorry, we're getting some weird interference out of nowhere. But I'd say please keep in touch if stuff continues to happen. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, dude, absolutely.
Is there a way that people can contact you anywhere, or?
Yeah, just I'd say probably my Reddit page. It's
Okay.
It's ogre like
I
booger
can
without a B.
I can link that in the description too. Just yeah, and then people can send you a direct message on Reddit. But
Yep.
my goodness, this is nuts. I'm going to be thinking about this for a few hours tonight. I'm sure you think about it all the time. You live it.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Wow. Good stuff, Roger. Thank you so much. If there's anything else, or if there's anything I can ever do to help, please feel free to reach out. But I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.
Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Slaya. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list.
These are all in Oregon, by the way. Oak Ridge, Dexter, Fall Creek, Deschutes National Forest area, Cultus Lake, Spirit Lake, Subtle Lake, McKenzie River area, Sweet Home area, the area west of Crater Lake, east of 230 West Diamond Lake Highway, and north of 62 Crater Lake Highway.
You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.